Finally, I'm going through waves of emotion as in response to it. My first reaction was, no, this is wrong, and I'm going to do everything I can to prove that it is. And I felt very determined, and my family felt very determined.
Well, an emotional Amanda Knox reacting to an Italian court's guilty verdict against her and her former boyfriend in the murder of her roommate Meredith Kircher in 2007. The question now is, will Amanda Knox ever see the inside of an Italian prison? Is she headed to Italy? Joining me now, Dan Shore, a former prosecutor, and John Manuelian, a criminal defense attorney. That is the big question, Dan. I mean, what happens next now for Amanda?
It's a complicated process. First, the Supreme Court in Italy has to review this verdict, and Amanda Knox gets an appeal. If it's confirmed on appeal, then there will probably be an extradition request to the United States, and then it becomes first a political battle, even before a legal battle. Will the State Department recommend extradition to the Justice Department? There's a big question about whether the fact that she was tried once and found not guilty and then tried again and found guilty, whether that will count as double jeopardy under our laws. But we do have an extradition treaty with Italy, so this is a complicated process going forward.
John, I'm just curious your thoughts on the legal process overall, and now hearing this guilty verdict again, just from your legal perspective, what do you make of it?
Well, I find it very interesting because the issue in this case, in order for us to determine whether or not there's double jeopardy, is whether there was in fact a finality of judgment. And what I mean by that, Jenna, is in the United States, if you're acquitted by a jury of your peers, then there's a finality of judgment and you can't be prosecuted again. That would be double jeopardy. But in the Amanda Knox case, she wasn't found not guilty. She was found guilty only to be overturned in 2011 by the appellate court. So there's not really a finality of judgment, which would give the Department of Justice legal sufficiency to send Amanda Knox back to Italy. Now, whether or not they do that for political reasons and whether they're going to honor Article 6 of the bilateral treaty in 1983 remains to be seen.
And I'd love to get into more of the politics in just a moment, but before we do, Dan, it's, again, an interesting process, right? She's found guilty, she's found acquitted, she's found not guilty. Is it possible for her to get a fair trial? Because those that think she is guilty say there was the evidence in the first trial, it was shown, that's the real verdict. And of course, there's those that say no, that the system is just not what it is here. I mean, there is a little bit of that about the Italian court system, and there's a big question about whether or not it's efficient.
Right. There's been problems with this prosecution from the beginning. She was found guilty in the first trial, and one of the biggest pieces of information that the prosecution used was DNA on a knife that was later found to not really show the DNA that they said it showed, and then she was found not guilty in the second trial. For the third trial, the judge has 90 days from yesterday to issue a detailed ruling on the basis for the conviction, and that'll be really interesting, where they really spell out the reasons for finding her guilty. She can appeal, but there's clearly problems in this whole process from the beginning.
And one wonders how that's going to weigh in. Just real quick, John, on the politics, there is a person that the United States wants extradited back to the United States, and that is Edward Snowden, who's in Russia. And we've been asking for it.
Exactly.
Do you think the politics of all of this and wanting to set a good example could put pressure, if she is found guilty once and for all by the Supreme Court in Italy, to extradite her?
Well, sure. I mean, right now, Edward Snowden, like you said, Jenna, is a hot button. But the question is going to be whether or not this is going to be a hot button issue years from now. Remember, the appeal is not going to be filed until 2015. And who knows what will happen with the Snowden issue, or whether or not we're going to give up Amanda Knox. That remains to be seen.
What do you think they're going to do if it comes down to it and is found guilty again? Do you think she goes?
Well, based on the popular opinion, I think most Americans feel sympathy for her. There's not enough evidence in this case, like Mr. Shore said, and I think that she's got a lot of political backing behind her, so I would say probably not.
Very interesting. Dan, John, great to have you both weigh in on this topic today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna.